You could put, for number 6, you could say completed high school and or attending post-high school education.
What if we said completed education, vocational program, or attending post-secondary education? We just added to that.
Yeah.
That won't mess anything up.
Because I don't think we're going to have anybody that completed college at the end. I think, well, I hope we don't get them on this.
So if we just add to that, completed education, vocational program, or attending post-secondary, they would not get worse. They would actually stay the same, which is the best they can be. Right?
I was just gonna say,
Does that make it-
happen often, but you have a lot of kids that go to DYS and get a GED while they're there.
Right.
And then you get them home and you enroll them in college. So
Or
for
vocational.
aftercare kids, it could happen a lot.
Right. So if we add to that, that resolve that for everyone,
Yeah.
and then all we have to do is just, I can fix that in the form. Very good. So, if you, like I said, we think we thought of everything, but obviously we haven't. So as we go through these, we can fix this now and get it fixed before July 1. Okay.
And use the comments on that section.
Also,
Encourage your
yes.
staff to use the comments because, you know, when we're doing the reports, the comments aren't going to come up. So we don't want to show false negatives on this. So I think this is a good resolution, but we do have the ability to go in and look at individual pages. And so, you know, I would like to know how that's working. So.
Also, that's a good point, because if you have a trend or a pattern, then that's when you're going to go pull comments and see if there was any explanation about something. Okay, A and B, valid and invalid. So you're going to be expected to fill out school for every kid that you open up services in the DYS contract. You're going to be expected to fill that out and check one of those. And then you're going to have to check whether your information is valid or invalid. And basically what that means is that A, it's been verified, or B, it has not been verified. Do you all understand whether or not, do you have the ability to make that judgment about whether something is verified or not verified? And do you feel comfortable with that?
I mean, as far as being a therapist and I'm doing an assessment and the parent is telling me this kid is not doing good in school, that's how I say it's been verified, because they're saying I don't have any educational records to confirm or disconfirm what the parent's saying. So
Do
that's
you
how-
get, as you work with them, would you get reports from the school and stuff?
No, not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily. So you're going by what the parent says, and I think that that is verified. In my opinion, I would call that verified. Do you all agree with that?
Right.
Do you all agree with that? I think if the parent verifies it, that is.
Well, I would say.
I have to talk to the school. I'm talking.
Right. If you're going by word of mouth, whether it's parent, child, or whoever, I think that if you get 2 people saying the same thing, that would be verified. If it's one person telling you something, that would not be verified. So if you only have the parent telling you Johnny's not doing well in school, but Johnny's saying, "Oh, I'm doing fine," then before you mark verified, you would need to get something from the school that
Right.
says whether
That's
it's how
right.
he's doing.
Especially if it's disputed by the kid. If they both say, she's right, I'm not doing well in school, then I think that it is verified. Yes.
If, while opening up a case on a non-custodial DYS case, and for instance, while asking the school question, the parent is saying like what she was saying, well, this kid's doing well, this kid's not doing well in school, but the kid is saying, yes, I am doing well in school, and I have been going to school, for instance, but you don't have anything right then and there to verify that. Can you, at the beginning of the opening, can you mark it as unverified, and maybe during 6 months it can be verified?
Well, I think you should, if you have it disputed like that it is not necessarily valid at intake. If you have it disputed and you don't have any way to verify it before you close the intake.
Melissa, is there any way to go back and change information? So like if they fill out something at intake and then they get it they get it verified later, or if the information, they find out that that was actually not true, is there a way to change it, or is it
They
stuck?
can't edit it, but they can send me a help ticket and I can change it for them.
Okay.
If it's significant, you might want to do that. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just concerned about the language of verified and unverified. In my mind, if you're verifying something, you have documented it, and it is in file, it's not word of mouth, because as we all know, word of mouth can be in error, and you can have 3 or 4 different perceptions of whether somebody's doing good in school or not, depending on what goals you're trying to measure. Is their discipline, has that improved? So what I'm trying to say is, it'd be nice to have a clarification exactly what does verified mean, not word of mouth. I think is probably not what we need to gauge our accuracy on.
And let me say that I'm an attorney, and so by training, and so with a lot of professions, for me, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So for me, my preference would be that we would have documentation of everything on this list. That if you are saying that Johnny is using drugs or alcohol, that you would have a positive drug screen to back that up. I know that that's not always practical, especially if you're reporting on services that other agencies are doing that you don't have any control over. And so if, for the sake of completing this form, because we'd rather have some information than no information, and so for the sake of completing this form, if you're only getting the information from one person who's telling you, honest to God, this is the truth, then, you can include that, but it would be unverified. If you've got more than one person telling you the same thing, now it would have to be the same thing, not, Johnny says, I've missed a couple of days this week, and his mom says, I can't get him to go to school at all, then you do not have verified information on that. So there needs to be some follow-up, but if you're getting consistent information, then you can go ahead and document that.
If the kid says, I'm not having a problem at school, but you have a truancy, is the reason that he's coming to you, then obviously, yeah.
What if you talk to
You
the
kind of
assistant
have to
principal?
use, some common sense in this too, because obviously that is documentation. If someone, is coming to you because they're not going to school, and that's the reason they were referred.
I come closer to believing the people that I talk to, like the assistant principal. Like that's who I talk to here, to verify, unverify something. I come closer to believing them.
And what I would recommend that you tell your staff is that if they are verifying information based on spoken information, not written down documentation, that in the comments, identify who they got that information from. So if they got it from, Johnny and Mom, write down Johnny and Mom. If they got it from Mom and assistant principal, then write that down.
Well, personally, I believe if we're getting a case that's coming from juvenile court for truancy, that's verified because they have an order for that, no matter what Johnny is saying, because it's verified through the court and through the school system already, they don't have in your hand that that child is truant by court of law. So that's the most verifiable information we have for that.
So what Carmen is saying is that she wants you to use the definition of 2 or more people are verifying that it's accurate or you have written documentation. Is that simplifying?
Yes.
The way you want it?
But if it's, for instance, the assistant principal, you wouldn't need another source, would you? Wouldn't that be enough to verify?
I think that if you're getting your information directly from the assistant principal, if you're talking to the assistant principal and they say that he's not coming to school and Johnny swears that he is, then just for the sake of protecting yourself, making sure that the information is true, just ask the assistant principal to fax you something. So then you've got it on paper and it's double verified.
This is part of working the case anyway. You're going to have to do this stuff to work the case. You're going to have to find out if they're really going to school or not. And you're not going to just take their word for it. That's part of what we do.
And I say that, I have all the trust in the world in our school officials. But I do know, I've been in the court, and there are officials that have it in for some of these kids. And so when they're talking to you you, a lot of this is not about, well, these are the number of days. It's about, Johnny's a troublemaker, causing all kinds of problems in the school. Well, if you've got, I mean, just because it's an assistant principal, that doesn't mean that their word is gospel. And so if you've got some dispute there,
Amen to that.
then, you know, get some documentation as well.
You know, they have school hearings in my area, so you can get that from juvenile probation, you know, anytime. You know. If the kid is having a problem in school, it's on record because they have to present those records to the judge.
Right. You know, in the process of doing your intake, where you sit, I mean, y'all aren't just gonna come in and, you know, never talk to this kid and just start filling out this form. That's not how it works. I know you all know that. You're gonna be talking to these people and finding out about them. When you do your intake, it's a very long, involved interview, and you're gonna be looking at documentation that's been provided to you on the referral, either from the school or from the court or from the probation officer. So you are going to have documentation to back up what you put on these forms. Maybe not in every single category, every situation, but for the most part you are, and that's part of working your case. So if you're not verifying the information that you're even putting in your case file, then I think you're in trouble anyway. So, I mean, we can split hairs here and talk about what we do and what we don't do. But the bottom line is, you gotta verify this information at some point if you're working this case. So,
Well, it's the
pay me
simple-
now, pay me later.
If the school is coming in to file a petition for fines because the kid is missing too many days, they have to tell the judge how many days the child missed.
Sure,
Just ask for a copy, why you for it?
sure. Fine.
I would think that the time you're using the unverified would be a 6-month follow-up.
Exactly.
When the case is closed and you may have trouble tracking somebody down, and all you could do is talk to somebody and they said, you know, yeah, he's been going to school or whatever, because the case is closed, it's been 6 months, it might be hard to find the information. But at intake and at 6 months, you should be able to verify your information.
And at discharge too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
You're
As long as
absolutely
the
right.
case is open, you should be able to verify.
Totally.
It's
The
the
spirit
discharge, the 6 months.
intended behind the valid and invalid is really on the follow-up to figure out if, you know, the information, you're following the kid, to know how good your information is, to know what the actual outcome was. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. School. Are we done with school? Family. In this section, we said you need to mark with what's going on within the last 30 days. Okay? Does anybody have a question about any of those under family? Or do you think that you understand?
Yes. Our number through the families is living in one of the below categories with major conflict.
Right.
Could you repeat that, or Madeline, can you repeat the question?
He said he had a question about living in one of the below categories with major conflict. That means if you're living in a group home or emergency shelter with major conflict, if you're living with other family or a foster home with major conflict, or if you're living with your own family with major conflict, then if you're fit into any of those, then you get 3. You get rated 3.
Okay, because when I'm doing, I was always looking for specifically living, because we deal with a lot of family clients that are living at home with major conflicts, but they're still with their parents.
But that's number 3.
That's number 3.
It's
Mark
number
three.
three.
That's number 3, because it's one of the below categories, okay? If they're living in a group home or emergency shelter, or living with other family or foster home, or if they're living on their own or independently with major conflict, then they get 3.
Major conflict.
Is there a definition here of what a major?
We're going to talk about that a little later.
There are definitions.
But major in general requires external intervention. Minor is, that's eventually going to resolve, kind of normal stuff, but it's not going to require.
I knew that used the definition.
Yeah.
The definitions are on page 7. And Scott's got those on there. Okay. justice system, we're hoping that maybe the changes we made in justice system will help make this easier to fill out, and also it'll help us with our outcomes as well, because I didn't realize until we had already done our year-end report that about the default setting, that if you were an aftercare kid, that it went to DYS commitment and you could never move beyond that. So if you had no ability to improve the kids that were on aftercare, which was rather discouraging, you know, even if you improved, you couldn't put it in right track and report it. So that's going to be corrected, or has already been corrected. Good. So we've changed several things here. It says if they're at intake, you would put the current status. This is on your form. All other or any new or additional charges or dispositions. So if there's anything new, you would need to check what it applies to. Yes.
Okay, I know you asked Melissa this, so I know our agency was experiencing, when we closed the aftercare case, it would only let us click on DYS commitment. We couldn't check number 6.
It's been changed.
When did that go into effect, Melissa? That we fixed that?
It's gonna be July 1 because we got everything rolling together.
So it's still,
I think it may be still in life, but
okay.
for July 1 forward.
So if you've been doing this like we have, then like our agency has, and we're still not going to get a good measurement on justice system for this last fiscal year either. So hopefully July 1 for the next fiscal year
We're pushing it all out at once.
we'll have a better measure. So if you've been using this, remember that if you, like our stats came back, I was disappointed to see our justice system stats, and then I found out that aftercare kids were not able to move beyond the DYS commitment. So you've been using this and you was disappointed as well. That may be why. Hopefully, Melissa says, we're going to make Melissa make sure that she lives up to this, right, Melissa? And she's here. Yes,
So all those kids, all those clients that we had prior to July 1st, you said this is going to go in effect July 1st, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the clients prior to that, where we were having some issues, what about those clients? Are we
those records that are currently on track.
that are outstanding, where we haven't done like the 6 month and?
It'll go by the new form.
Hopefully, yeah, you'll be able to go in and do
It's
it.
gonna go by the new form.
Yeah, you'll just have to do. It won't be accurate like those that start July 1.
But are we still responsible for putting in the?
Yes.
Correct. Yes, you're responsible now for putting it in.
Yeah, but we've had some issues.
Right.
But are those gonna be resolved so we can go move forward with the ones that we?
Anything 7-1 forward, you will not have to put DYS commitment. It will not be the standard. Anything prior to 7-1, it will still be DYS commitment.
Okay, I have another question. Back in 2012, when we were doing the wireless assessments, and we said that we were no longer working with those YAP kids, all we were doing, we weren't providing services. The only thing we did was assessment. So we had a lot of those on our list that, when it came up that we needed to do like a 3-month, 6-month, what do we do with those?
I would ask that those be taken out, because my
They will
advice.
be in the new report because it will look at it if it's wireless only, then you don't have to do it.
Right. And that's what we advise, that's what I advise my people, and that's what I advise anyone who had asked me previously. If that's the only service that you are doing, then you do not need to do this.
Okay, so would we need to provide you, Melissa, with a list of those clients, because you won't know?
I would ask for my list, and then I would go and ask for them to be removed. I would audit my
Tell me
list.
which ones are wireless
That's what I
only.
would do. Okay.
Because that should have been marked in the juvenile services form.
Right.
And if it was marked in the juvenile services form, it will be taken off the list.
Yeah, so if they're missing them, we want to make sure that it gets taken off.
That's how you control that when you enter your juvenile services.
when this first started, and then they changed it over and.
Well, the problem, I think, with that was that instead of having a group meeting like this, where we all talked about how it was gonna be, they did it at individual agencies, and people started ask the question this way, and it was decided this way, and then another agency to ask the question this way. So this is why we wanted everyone to come, so we can talk these things through and make sure that everybody's doing it the same way. But if you have a list, if DYS is showing in Right Track a list of kids that need an intake or a 3-month or 6-month that were wireless CMI, I would make sure that I mark that, send it back to them and say, these need to be taken out.
Okay.
Because they should never have been put in, really. Yes.
Kind of the right track for you question. In the past, if we've done
I can't hear you real
in the
well.
past, if we've done a CBP and entered it, say we did it early, then another one would pop up. You know, say we did it a couple of days early or something, then another one would pop up and say that it's overdue. It didn't recognize the previous one because I guess it was going by start date. Are we going to be able to do them early, or do we have to be right on the dot every time that we enter it? And is it automatically going to flag it as not being done when in fact it has been done?
All it does is look forward to see if there is a 6-month in there. And if there's not a 6-month in there after 180 days, it's going to flag it and tell you you don't
So
have
what
it.
you're saying is it's going to effectively change how it's currently doing. It's not going to flag it. If we've already done it and it's not on the exact date from intake, is it going
It
to
doesn't
flag
look for an exact date, it looks to see if there's a 6-month in there.
But
it?
you're
Well, I was going to
saying
say, in
after
the past, it
180
hasn't done
days.
that at all.
So if they do it early, if they do it before 180 days, it's not going to see it.
Right. It's gonna
So don't
register
do
that
it
it's
early.
done.
Don't do
It's
it
gonna
early.
it's
Don't
gonna
do it
register
early.
that it's done, is what I'm saying. It's gonna see it that there's a 6 month already in there.
The date is,
Because
the 180 day date that it looks for is the effective date of the intake,
Yes.
the intake of general services.
And you said there's the drop-down menu in Right Track, so you designate. whether
And
you're
a
doing
lot of the
intake.
problem is people were not using that drop down. And so they're like, no, I entered an intake. No, in Right Track you entered a 3-month because you didn't change the drop down.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Well, actually, I went through a whole agency and it took us a month, and we had to fix all of them. So I'm talking from personal experience, that a lot of times what they entered, or they entered it on a different case. This kid had 2 cases. You filled out this one's still hanging.
I think people did not realize about the drop down. I think when they go in, they may not have looked. They're assuming that it's where it needs to be. And so your data entry people are going to have to look for what it is they're filling out. They're going to have to look at the one that the caseworker gave them, and then they're going to have to look on the drop-down list and pick the right one. Or you may have, it may not get logged in correctly. Okay? Yes, Otis?
Okay, let me ask you this right here. What if in one of these categories you have more than one thing going on with the kid here?
Okay.
Say on the justice system, you got DYS committed. What if he's committed to DYS and he has a court hearing in traffic court?
Well, DYS commitment is the most serious, so we would check that.
Well,
So you-
Madeline, my question would be, if he's a DYS commitment, but he's on aftercare and he goes before the court while on aftercare, would you not want to walk the court? Because we already know
Well,
he's
it's
a
what's
DYS.
happened in it's what's new. It's not that you're gonna check, you're not gonna check DYS commitment just because he's active yet. We're gonna check what's happened at intake current status, all other, any new or additional charges or dispositions. So you have an aftercare again,
Why
okay?
have intake?
Well, excuse me?
You only mark the last one and then intake.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What, at intake, could you mark both of those though, at intake, huh?
No,
Mark the most serious.
we're gonna mark the most serious DYS. For example, if you have someone committed to DYS and they also get, sent to, adult court, you're gonna mark adult court, okay?
Okay.
Because that's more serious. So you're not going to mark both of them.
Well, what if he went to adult court, but he still got committed to DYS? I mean, which one of those?
Well, if you look on the list, the lower the number, the more serious it is.
Right.
So DYS commitment, unless they were committed to DYS and also sent to the Department of Corrections, then DYS commitment's gonna be the most serious.
Right.
But if you got, I mean, let's say he was committed to DYS and then, but he also has charges pending in adult court, well, the adult charges are serious, but he wasn't sentenced to the Department of Corrections, and so therefore the DYS commitment is still the most serious.
But the reason I asked it is I've had kids arrested, because they failed to appear in court, when they came back from the DYS committee.
But it's not a new charge.
It would have to be a new charge.
Right.
Well, no,
All intake, at intake, current status, all other, any new or additional charges or disposition. Okay? That's what it says.
Looking for the DYS commitment, except for the intake. After that,
Yeah, you're not gonna check DYS commitment every, every 6 months after, like when they
No,
get
I'm
out of
talking about-
aftercare,
Yeah.
you're not gonna check, DYS commitment. They weren't committed while you were providing aftercare.
And if they go to DYS and they're in a residential program and they come home on aftercare and then they pick them up on some adult charge that occurred before they were committed to
Right.
DYS, that's not a new charge. It was something that happened before they went there. They didn't go out and commit a new crime. So you're not gonna say they have a new charge.
Right.
Well, on the discharge, if I have one that's on aftercare, and they have marked anything besides DYS commitment, you won't say.
That's fixed as of July 1.
Okay.
That's what we were talking about, that it's affected your current situation, but this is supposed to be resolved as of July 1. Okay?
One question.
Yes,
On the old form,
since you haven't asked any questions, and you look like a nice man.
it's a long way. The old form had juvenile court contact as an answer. Is that going to be number 4 still in your new form?
No, we don't have one that says contact because that was confusing.
Sometimes there were review hearings, and it's just forgive me, for paternalistic purposes. The court just wants to check, see how things are going.
Right.
That's not important to know, but what is important to know, if there are some new charges or new events that occur,
Right.
that gets law enforcement attention or the court's attention.
If they have a JPO referral, then it's going to be what?
If they are at intake,
Yes.
okay. If they have a JPO referral, then at intake, they're going to be number 4.
Okay. That's where we've been lumping all the other.
But if they go for review 3 or 4 times within the 6 months, but they don't have any charges, then you wouldn't put that again,
You put no new charges.
Right, you put no charges. Because they've shown progress. Yes, ma'am.
On under number 6, would the bins and diversions fall under number 6?
Yes.
Okay.
I have another question. Because this form's a little bit different and
Okay, we're gonna take a break after this, so let's try to keep the sidebar conversations to a minimum so we can hear what everybody's saying.
because an intake may have been done on the other form, should all of our clients as of July 1st, the information is going to be tracking differently if it wasn't filled out the same before July 1st. So is that going to be part of the presentation today, or is that kind of a question that is up to the agency?
We have not built that into this, okay? It's kind of like when we started doing it 2 years ago. We just lost all of those people that we were doing information on before that, and we took up this new. So it's really, unless the Division of Youth Services wants to measure the ones prior to this July 1st, using the new form that, like she said, is somewhat different, I would think that that information would not be comparable with every case that we start July 1. What do you think, Carmen? That's a DYS question.
Well, in the form, and I'm not as familiar with the old form, but from what I understand, it was still a 1 through 6 scale for all of these questions. And the general areas, where there's still these 6 general areas, and so there may be some way that you can translate and show progress. I mean, remember, the purpose of this is to show was there progress or was there not progress. We're talking, I mean, I don't think we're talking about thousands of cases that would fall under. I would say, yeah, maybe hundreds of cases. I had rather have data than no data. So my preference on this would be, for the sake of having data, to do the best that you can. Use the new form to show progress, use the comments liberally. The data that we get out of this is not going to be as valid as what we're going to get on the cases where we use only the new form.
But if you did a new indicator form for every client that you have, then you have more of a benchmark, but your timing, I don't know how you would document what timing in the process of that.
Exactly.
So that's where it's kind of like, I don't
Right, so you
see
wouldn't
the
do a new
beneficial.
intake, but let's say that you had a kid that came to you you opened the case last month. And so in 4 months, it's gonna be time to do the 6 month, which that's not new. You had to do a 6 month anyway. Go ahead and use the new form. Try to translate as best as you can to show progress where there's progress, to show regression where there's regression. And the numbers will not be as valid, but we can generate reports where we only use the intake starting at July 1. So we can it's not going to contaminate the data that we're collecting, but we still want to know where there's been progress on the kids that you've already got. But you'll need to use the new form because the old one isn't going to be in there anymore.
And remember, it's like she said, there's still 6, the rating is still 1 through 6, and it's still showing a progression. And that really, the spirit of that has not changed through this form. The only thing we've done is just clean up and try to clear up.
And if you need clarification on a particular kid, I mean, even if you have to email me on 300 kids, then I will answer 300 emails to do that.
Bonnie?
So we're not gonna collect Finn's charges at all under the justice system? Like if a kid goes to court and is charged with truancy, a new truancy violation, or a new runaway, that's not gonna be collected?
We don't have a place for that.
Well,
I
on
would think
intake
that
on intake for offense, there are no charges because it's services in lieu of charges.
The fans are charged.
Well, FINS is not a justice system charge.
Right.
FINS is, so if you're getting status offenders, then you're gonna pick up that information in your school and your family. But if these kids are committing status offenses, they're not committing crimes. And so we're not picking them up on the justice system side.
If you think about it, if someone had to file a FINS because of an issue, then they're living with their family with major conflict, right? Would you count that?
Yeah.
So that's where we're getting
So
at.
in other words, under the justice system, you're only counting criminal behavior.
Delinquents, right.
Like on your juvenile services form for offense, you enter charges in A. There's not an actual crime.
But-
It's the same for this, it's not an actual crime.
Well, like, for non-custody kids, like as of today, we receive a case and we put that kid in, then, right now, the way it is now, we we have to put it in for 3 months. Is right track gonna
That's
just,
gonna get rid of the 3 months.
it's gonna get rid of the, even if you enter it today?
Yeah.
Right.
It'll keep that data, because it's not gonna change until July 1.
Right.
So up until July 1, it's gonna show you need it. But you can, the ones that you're not supposed to be doing, you can ignore it. As of July 1, it's gonna take them off the list.
There's not gonna be
If you
one.
run a new report after July first, then your list will be
They're
considered.
just gonna
Yes.
drop off.
Yes,
It's just gonna drop, okay. Okay, your question.
Scott wanted to jump in on
Well,
the.
and I'm going to confuse the issue because that I know the 13 agencies serve a number of FINS kids. And that in its original incarnation, that those were the kids that you needed to serve. We've morphed that, and it's largely a delinquent population. But the category 4, that in my mind, and granted most of you know me, is tiny, is that if you are serving a FINS kid, and if he or she is held, or there's a contempt hearing, that's the same as violation of probation. So that means that the FINS child is not complying with those conditions and having come to court and answer to that.
Right.
But Carmen's spoken and says, we just want delinquents, and I'm saying,
Well,
But it
no.
has contempt
But it
on
has,
there.
that includes violation of probation and
Yeah.
contempt. So if you've got a fin who already, if you've got a kid who came to court on a truancy and they were placed on probation in the fins,
or
then that would not,
conditions.
that would be no charges. But then,
Right.
once they were on probation and they're telling the
Conditions.
judge, or conditions, okay,
Supervision.
conditions, thank you, supervision, I'm sorry. But then you've got that same kid is telling the judge, you can't tell me what to do, you know.
Yeah.
And then they get brought up on violation,
Which is a
revocation,
delinquent charge.
which is delinquency, then you've got a new charge there.
It is gonna get counted.
Would you not make a status change, start changing the offense into?
In the juvenile services form, yes.
So you would need to.
And DYS does collect that information as well.
Yes.
So that would be something else that could be cool to see how many went from FIN's program designator to program designator. It's another way to collect information. Yes.
Okay, on the form that we're currently using, at 6 months, it had unable to locate or unable to participate or NA. Where is that at on the new form?
That is not on there because these are core things that you're required to fill out. There cannot be an NA. And there is no unable to locate. And that was not on the original form either. That was something that someone changed in the midstream and put in there without consultation with the committee or anybody that brought that up. So that was something DYS did on its own, actually. From one of these meetings where they went to a particular group and they wanted to change, so it should have never been changed.
So,
It should have been in there.
but I still have, so for example, if I have a kid that's coming in, supposed to be coming in for treatment, but they're non-compliant, so they, missed a certain amount of sessions and we close them for non-compliance, we still have to fill out at discharge at least these core. I don't have anything, what do I report if they haven't been coming in?
Well,
What do I report for school?
it would be invalid, whatever it was, if you hadn't had any contact with
But I
them.
wouldn't know what to check on 1 through 6.
Would you not try to find that out before you close the case? Would you not be looking to see, if they were attending school or any of those things?
If you never had contact and
I
never
haven't
got
had contact, no, I
police
don't know.
information.
I just closed the case and said they're non-compliant. They have not followed the treatment recommendations. And I closed the case.
It says within the last 30 days or for most recent school term. So you would not find out from the school when you close the case what their status was?
No.
I think you probably need to. I mean, that's what I would ask my people to do. I have an agency, and I would expect them to know their school status when they close the case, or try to find it out.
And so, say for instance, you try to find out some of the stuff and you still can't find it, what do you do?
So you're saying that if you try to call them, they don't answer the phone?
Yeah, like if the number's disconnected, or, that happens.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Happens all the time over here.
So that happens. That's a really,
Are these kids that are referred to you by court? Does the court know that information? You can't call them?
they don't know that number. I'll call them if I can't find the number. Sometimes we have the same number.
Yeah, they're going on either.
Well, if you can't find out where they are at discharge, you sure can't find out where they are 6 months after discharge.
So what do you do? We gotta fill out the form.
I was waiting till we got to the 6 months, that's a huge issue. They don't have to answer anything.
Well, I think when it says within the last 30 days or for most recent school term, I think I would fill out the most recent information that I had about the kid at discharge in your situation, and then I would mark invalid.
And then put in the comments.
Yes, and
That
put
you
in the
cannot
comments
contact.
that you have not been able to have contact and however. Okay? The most recent information that you have in that situation, invalid, and then write it down.
Okay.
Okay? Does that help? Okay. All right, anything else in this section? I think we're gonna take a break before we go to auxiliary outcomes. Anything else with this first section? Or do you want to just break for lunch now? Okay, let's ask about what the group wants to do then. Go ahead, Carmen.
No, it is 20 minutes till 12 right now. We've got two more sections in this initial, what was supposed to be the morning training. Janice and Scott are both going to address you guys. And then we have the afternoon is Melissa and Madeline doing the right track data piece. We can go ahead and give you guys a lunch break now and then come back and have a longer session in the afternoon. Or we can take like 5 minutes, come back and finish this morning and then do a lunch break. Which would you prefer?
Finish this section and then do a lunch break.
Okay. All right. Let's do like 5 minutes now. Refresh yourselves, and then we'll come back and finish this.
There's a restroom south that way. There's also restrooms north to the left. John, you're welcome, honey.
Thank y'all for your patience.
All right. I had a